Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I'd like to thank our committee and Delia Marks for coming up with a great idea, helping residents of Greenburgh and Fairview take control of our own needs and considering a co-op. The co-ops exist all over the United States with great successes, and there's a whole bunch of different options, and I feel that if it works in Brooklyn and around the country, we could do it, here. A co-op would enable residents to promote sustainable local organic food and farming. It's an opportunity to encourage community empowerment, where residents in Fairview would be able to take control of our own destiny instead of complaining and saying, we need a supermarket or a grocery store. We don't wait for anybody to do it. We would do it ourselves. And the key to the success is its owner, the people who set up the co-ops actually could own the co-op, so they actually have a stake in the success. Tonight, we're going to learn about the options that exist, because there's a whole bunch of different options, and hopefully then we could take the next steps. So I'd like to now invite Tasha Young to tell us a little bit more about this initiative, and I'd also like to express my sympathies because Tasha's father just passed away, and it shows Tasha's dedication to the town and to the community for putting other people first ahead of herself. So we do appreciate it, and also express our deepest sympathies during this very difficult time for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak with you about economic empowerment in Fairview by creating an enterprise or empowerment zone. I'm so thankful to the supervisor for welcoming the community in this way. I am by nature a community organizer, and I do believe that we have such brilliance that when we put our heads together, we can be, like he said, the masters of our own destiny here in the region. I also want to thank members of the Fairview Empowerment Group, and they're all around the room. Most of them are on the dais, and members of the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals, and also members that are in the audience. So later they might identify themselves, but certainly raise your hand if you would like to just say hello to everyone that is watching. Hello. So the reason why I think we're at a very opportune time is because the federal government, state government, and local county government, after economic downturns such as 9/11, such as the Great Recession, there's always an opportunity with the right people in office for funding that is allocated toward certain initiatives. So the last time we saw was after the Great Recession, during the Obama administration, there was the creation of the Relief, Unemployment Insurance Reauthorization, and Job Creation Act. And that is where the term of empowerment zone was revitalized. And that was money and funding allocated for under economically disadvantaged areas of the nation to receive funding for local hiring and job creation. Fairview, at times, we have grown. We are, our property values have increased and our zoning has changed. So sometimes we're not always eligible for high crime, high poverty funding. But right now, after the economic downturn with COVID-19, there is a concentration on areas that have experienced disparity or inequity. And that does speak to this region. So it's not necessarily just income. It's not necessarily just zip code. But it is, if you are in a region that is experiencing outcomes that are different from other areas that are nearby you, you can be targeted for equitable funding. So this is why it's very important to seize this opportunity. And if there is funding available for business development, which there is, for minority-owned business development, which there is, for recovery after COVID-19 for small businesses and aspiring business owners, that is what we're facing right now. So again, we're going to talk to different professionals about different business entities and different business models. And then we have the opportunity to say what we want, to curate the economic development for this region. So without further ado, I would like to turn over to our Commissioner of Planning. Is that Garrett's title? Yeah, Garrett Duquesne.
Thank you very much, Tasha. That was a wonderful introduction to why we're here, and I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion. What I'd like to do is just, first of all, Garrett Duquesne, Planning Commissioner for the town of Greenburgh. I'm just very proud to work for this wonderful town. What I'd like to do is go over a basic overview of the town of Greenburgh, just to get an understanding of some basic land use concepts, and then I'm going to jump right into Fairview in the context of the town of Greenburgh. So I'm going to display a few graphics. And Krista, if you could just let me know in the auditorium that my audio sounds okay. I turned up the volume. You had indicated it was not good before, or if somebody could let me know if it sounds okay.
No, a little louder. Sorry.
Turn up the volume.
Okay, I will turn up my mic a little bit more, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah, much better.
Okay, very good. Okay, great. And I assume my screen is shared and all can see?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the town of Greenburgh is the area on the screen that you see, and it's encompassed by the 6 villages, which are in gray, as well as the unincorporated area, which is the white. So for all purposes going forward, when we reference the town of Greenburgh, we will be referencing the unincorporated Greenburgh specifically, which is, again, the area in white. And the main reason for that is, of course, the town of Greenburgh has its own zoning, planning, and town board, and sets the zoning regulations, the use regulations. So the control is there. So all focus is on the unincorporated area. Our town of Greenburgh has a population of 46,436, and that's a 2020 updated figure, up from, 42,863 from 2010. So we gained just under 4,000 residents in the last 10 years, so a growing community for sure. In the map here, and I know it's not highlighted great, but the green section is actually the Fairview. So when you hear Fairview, Fairview is actually a census designated place. So it has its own geography as well as census figures. So I'm going to share some of those in a moment. That's sort of the context of the town of Greenburgh. And Fairview is really centrally located in the town of Greenburgh and runs along the 119 corridor, and is really forms the bridge between the village of Elmsford and the city of White Plains. So what I've displayed now is a zoom in on that Fairview neighborhood and Fairview census designated place. And the population in 2010 was 3,099, and it's increased by 3.8% up to 3,217. Again, here's the 119 corridor.
Right, okay. Garrett, I just want to bring attention. Can we zoom in a little bit more on your screen so the people in the back could see?
Yes, much better.
Yes.
Yes, please keep those that advice coming. I appreciate it. It looks so much different where I am.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jackson.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, there's the zoom in on Fairview. What I've also done is I've overlaid the Fairview census designated place over our zoning map. And you get a sense of different, there's a multitude of zoning districts here. Fairview has a great mix of retail, commercial, religious institutions, residential, both multifamily, single family, townhouses. So there's a diverse array of land uses in the Fairview community. And I think what I also would like to highlight is that from a zoning perspective, in this next graphic, when you think about where's the sort of the retail center of Fairview, or the mixed use zoning in Fairview, it's highlighted in this blue area, and it's a combination of IB district, intermediate business, and UR district. And I think what's important to note is that from a land use perspective, there really are no zoning barriers. So co-op use, supermarket use, mixed use space with community space, these are all permitted uses. So from a zoning perspective, I think it's important to highlight that there are no barriers there. Also important, what this graphic shows is, again, is Fairview, that centralized mixed-use retail corridor. But this green circle represents a half-mile radius around Fairview. So you can really tell why Fairview is an economic center. You've got quite an array of land use density within a half-mile radius. If I were to zoom this out to a mile, you probably have exponential density in terms of maybe 100% extra density. So there's quite a bit of walkability to the downtown Fairview area, as well as very short drive with great density. And one other thing that I'd like to close with is just, and I will zoom in here, is I know a lot of the talk is going to be about the needs of Fairview, and there's been a food gap established, if you will, since A&P vacated the crossroads, and that was actually back in 2011, so 10 years ago. But I just did want to highlight some of the existing food options in the area, just to give you a sense of why that gap exists and what's happening around us. So what you can see here, and again, the half-mile radius hopefully gives us a sense of proximity. But within proximity to Fairview, you do have Acme and Apple Farms, which are two mid-size supermarkets with different specializations. H Mart outside of the half-mile radius. There's a ShopRite, which is in Elmsford, that's under construction, and Stop and Shop, which is about 10 years old on 119. So I think that gives an understanding of sort of where we are from a proximity perspective with Fairview. But again, I consider Fairview, just an excellent place, and really the heart of this portion of the town of Greenburgh. So I know we have a great group of panelists, and as Planning Commissioner, I really appreciate being here, and I look forward to hearing from residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garrett. I just have a literacy moment. When you say intermediate business, can you just give the definition of what that zoning is?
Sure. Intermediate business allows a mix of basically office, retail. There's actually some single-family residential and intermediate business. It's a zoning district that's not too prevalent in the town, but actually, I'm really glad you asked that question. I'm going to jump back here to the overall map, and I want to just highlight a very important zoning and land use consideration. Between the city of White Plains, where my cursor is now, and the village of Elmsford, you do have, along 119, a series of different zoning districts. You've got a mix of IB, and I'm sorry, I know that this is a challenge to read on the screen, but you've got a mix of IB, you've got UR, LI, light industrial, UR is urban renewal, CB, closed business, DS, design shopping. In general, along 119, these uses do allow retail, restaurant, commercial, office, institutional uses. Per the comprehensive plan of the town of Greenberg, there is a policy that talks about a unifying zoning district that would essentially replace all these zoning districts. And I do see that as an opportunity to ensure that there are not uses that are out there that could likely be compatible, but that are presently zoned out. So I think it's important to note that while these are the existing array of uses, we do have a policy in the town of Greenburgh comprehensive plan to come up with a uniform district. And I feel like a meeting like tonight is going to be very informative and helpful in formulating that zoning district. So I hope that helps with that question.
So is it safe to say that right now we have a clean zoning slate that pretty much of what will be discussed tonight is allowable through zoning?
I think that's an excellent way to frame it, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any commentary
Thank you.
from you?
Garrett, do you know when the supermarket, the ShopRite in Elmsford is going to open?
I do. That supermarket is slated to open in October 2022. And
Just to speak about the area that is subject to the most zoning. As you know, Fairview, entire Fairview was urban renewal. The comprehensive plan removed that designation because it was no longer a depressed area. But we left urban renewal on 119, the commercial area. So that's an area, if you come up with the right proposal, that we left that open for final designation, looking at what will be in the best interest of Fairview and the town along that corridor. So that is an opportunity to propose something in that area.
Okay, and maybe we could talk more about that and give some more information about what encompasses the urban renewal zone, what that means, what benefits are available to the community on 119. Yes?
No, I think there's no, at this point, there's no benefit for urban renewal. That's why we're trying to get rid of it. The purpose of urban renewal is to get rid of blight, and in the process, you give developers more flexibility in building. However, in the residential area, that was built up. It was just a working class, middle class area, and we felt at that point, anybody come in should have to adhere to the zoning restrictions, so any zoning requirements. So the need for urban renewal in the residential area was removed. We did not have a clear plan for what to do with the commercial portion of 119. Therefore, the commercial part of 119 is still urban renewal. And that's why then I said that opens the door to come up with a good plan to remove urban renewal from that zone also, because the ultimate plan is to do away with urban renewal because we don't have blighted areas in the town. So there's no need for it.
You have to come to the podium.
Garrett, could you tell us how far the supermarkets that you listed are from the zone?
Sure. Let me bring it up. I don't have an exact amount right now, but I would say, okay, so the green circle is a half mile. So Apple Farms is right on the fringe of a half mile. Acme is within a half mile. H Mart looks like it's about 3/4 of a mile. And I would say ShopRite is about, and this is all, straight line as the crow flies, 1 mile. Stop and Shop likely 1.5 miles.
So most of them are outside the area, right?
And it depends on where you're looking at Fairview. If you're looking from Manhattan Avenue, I'll bet you it's a mile to Acme, which is the closest market. I wouldn't include Apple Farms. It's not really a supermarket.
It's not a full service.
It's not a full-service supermarket.
Yeah, so
Certainly not within walking distance.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing within walking distance.
The
I think
closest
is the take home.
serviceable supermarket to Fairview is Acme, for sure.
it's a mile.
And that's about a mile. And the next one will be, in 2022, the ShopRite but you know what the traffic can be like between Manhattan,
The
where Manhattan
ShopRite
Avenue
is 2 miles
over to
at
9A. So it's at least 2 miles
2
away.
miles, yes.
Yeah.
So there's no convenient,
No.
and you say walking distance, sometimes walking distance is not just the measure, is access, easy access,
There's
like
no
the
public
view.
transportation
Yes.
either to get there easily.
Yes, easily,
So-
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have to move on to our panel. We did prepare a panel tonight to address the residents, but I do want to just, for my own clarity, and perhaps anyone out there, the corridor of 119 in the Fairview area is under urban renewal,
Most
the
of-
commercial
Yeah.
zone, right?
Most
Okay,
of
so
it,
just to be clear.
Thank you.
Good question.
I think from Apple
There's a
Farm.
variety of zoning districts. Urban renewal, it comprises a good percentage of the Route 119 fronting properties in Fairview, but certainly IB, LI, DS are other zoning districts also that front on 119 in the Fairview area.
Garrett, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to make this simple. Assume it's a clean slate, because we have had the ability over the years, the town board has been very flexible when we see an opportunity, which is what we're here to discuss, of rezoning when we have to. So what I would assume for tonight, there is not a restriction whatsoever on what we put into that zone, and then we'll deal with the zoning issue afterwards.
That's a good point.
The entire, Garrett, can you help with the commercial zoning in Fairview, like how much space that is?
Sure, I'm going to share screen again. Okay.
Yeah, no, the acres, we could just,
Garrett, they're looking for the size of the commercial space, I believe, is that correct? The size of the commercial space in the that's located inside Fairview,
So-
approximately.
So this blue zone here,
Okay, yeah. The blue zone, nothing scientific about that, but ultimately, I encircled that area because it encompasses Crossroads, which is certainly, a major landmark in Fairview, and it has a variety of retail on the north side of 119, and as a landmark, of course, you've got Manhattan Avenue. So, I didn't go beyond that. There seems to be a lot of fixed, like this whole LI area is Rankatina car dealership area. There are car dealerships over here. This is really the critical mass of commercial area in Fairview. But certainly, there are storefronts as you head up to Knollwood Road to the east, and certainly as you head in a direction towards White Plains, you're still within walking distance. And you have other zoning districts, again, DS, design shopping, it's a commercial district, closed business, CB's, also a commercial type business. As far as land area, I can pull that number, I don't have it handy, but as frame of reference, we all have a good sense of how large Crossroads is and the corresponding retail on the north side of 119.
so it's very important to also know that this is our first community engagement town hall. We will have several more to engage the community, to answer more of these questions, to get the correct amount of not square footage, but the land that is available that we're talking about. So please, continue to keep these questions, maybe write them down. We will be participating in a 360-degree feedback loop, both in town halls and electronically.
Tasha, I just want to clarify something. I think the question was about development. Don't think of this just as development of a new building. We have plenty of vacant facilities already on 119 that can be filled up with things that will serve the Fairview community. So keep your mind, tonight is a night to keep your mind open to what the possibilities and what the needs of the community are going to be going forward. And then we will work on making that happen, okay? So don't worry about the constraints right now. Worry about what the needs of the community are.
Thank
Now we're going to
you.
hear from the panelists.
Yes, thank you. So we do have three panelists that are presenting from three different disciplines, and some intersecting disciplines. The first is Michael Brennan, who started the Federation of Ohio River Cooperatives in 1979. From 10 consumer food co-ops to over 100. He's also worked with the Federation of Co-ops throughout the USA, including NEFCO, the New England Federation of Co-ops, and DANCE, the Distribution Alliance of North County Cooperatives. He's also worked on setting up worker-owned cooperatives. Next, we would have Mo Mankline. She is the Policy Director of the United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Leads policy efforts at the federal level, works with membership at the state and local initiatives. She heads up health benefits initiatives and has been convening people in cooperatives and social impact for the past 12 years in a variety of roles, including 5 years with local news and events group, generosity.org. Mo is the founding board member of the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, the Media and Marketing Committee of the Kensington Community Food Co-op, the Policy Committee of the Sustainable Business Network, and she's also co-founder and organizer of the Betchel Test Fest, an annual festival highlighting women and transgender comedians in Philadelphia. Our third and final panelist is Jonathan Brown. Jonathan joined Pace Law Faculty in 2016. Professor Brown is the founding director of the school's Food and Beverage Law Clinic, which launched in January 2017. The Food and Beverage Law Clinic provides transactional legal services to small and medium-sized farms, food and beverage entrepreneurs, and not-for-profit organizations seeking to improve our food system. The clinic's legal services help clients expand access to local, healthy food in underserved communities and start or expand mission-driven business ventures, steward the preservation and transitioning of farmland for future generations of farmers, and implement innovative and sustainable production, processing, and distribution practices. So let's welcome the panel. So I'm going to start with Mike. Mike, you have experience in both the consumer co-op but also community co-op. Can you tell us the difference between the two?
Oh, I equate them the same. So a consumer co-op is what I have most experience in, very little experience with worker-owned co-ops, but some. So the consumer co-ops is primarily what I have a lot of experience in some decades ago. So I don't know what is meant by community co-op. You know, a lot of co-ops are called such and such community co-op, but they are just member-owned consumer cooperatives.
Okay, thank you. I believe here you are very familiar with the term of community co-op. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
I think a community co-op and a consumer co-op are very similar.
Okay.
I think we're talking about the local community being the members of the co-op. And that's opposed to a workers' co-op, which is essentially owned by the workers in the store themselves. Or sometimes it can be even a hybrid, which is a combination of both. The majority of co-ops in the United States to date are consumer co-ops, and the worker co-ops have been growing significantly in the last few years.
Are these co-ops, is there government funding, or is it just self-supporting?
So we'll go back to Michael and maybe Jonathan on that. How do worker co-ops or consumer co-ops, how are they funded?
Most consumer co-ops that I worked with were self-funding. Very little federal money was available for consumer co-ops.
Okay. Is there any example of a partnership with government?
Right. We have panel members who came here prepared to give a presentation
I think we should allow the panel members to give their presentation, and then we could ask questions. I think it'd be much more efficient to do it that way.
I don't have a particular presentation to give. I'm just here to offer, experience and information that I have.
Okay, then.
Yeah, that's me. I don't know about John or Mo, but that's me.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm happy to participate as part of a panel, but don't have a particular presentation per se.
Yes, the format of the panel is questions that are prepared in advance that the
Okay.
panelists have.
Okay.
So we're
I have
proceeding.
one other question.
Yes.
If we want to make this work, what advice would you give us? Do we start small? What's the best chance of starting a successful, co-op? What advice would you give? And how did it, what have other communities done? I think if this is happening all over the country, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do one here.
So we'll go to, Mike, we'll go away from you, but I want you to hold that question about funding, Mike. And John, since you help co-ops and other business entities that provide food get started, can you tell us, in your opinion, what is the easiest or the quickest way to enter into that kind of enterprise?
Well, I'm not sure if I can answer that question exactly, and maybe answer a slightly different question. I think one thing we've been talking about is different categories. Would it be helpful to start there, Tasha, before?
Yeah, gentlemen, if you don't mind, we have a Q&A for after the panel, but right now we do have questions that they've prepared to answer. So yes,
Also, just giving a quick breakdown of funding, if that's a question that people would like to have.
Thank you.
Quickly. Sure. First, I also don't have a presentation, but I just have a couple of slides that might help
thank you.
the group. So, like Tasha said, I work primarily with worker cooperatives, but I was also part of starting a worker cooperative in my community that we would call a consumer cooperative, right? I think according to the definition that was shared, also a community cooperative owned by many members. I think ours is about 1,000.
No, I'm just gonna pause for 1 second just to turn you up a little bit so we can hear you better.
Sure. I'm not sure if this will help, but I will try, and I'll try to get a little bit closer to my mic.
Okay, thank you.
So, I know that consumer co-ops have many different ways of being funded. A lot of it is turned out from the community. But I know in our case in Philadelphia, we had a lot of different sources of funding. We actually compounded funding both from the community development corporations and community development financial institutions, CDFIs. So we were able to create to lower the risk for all of the groups by having both the community and the city and community development groups and CDFIs and credit unions come together to mitigate some of that risk. So there are many, many different models across the country about how you can fund a cooperative. Often it does take several years. Ours took 10 years, but some of our comparative cooperatives have taken much less time because as we figure it out over time, and I think Fairview would probably benefit from many of the models that have been emerging over the last several years, that you'd be able to pull something together a lot quicker.
And when you said what we've learned throughout the last few years, that is what? That's the partnership with the community and who?
Between communities, different forms of city funding, lending from, particularly community development financial institutions has been really key. It's really about building, I think a lot of the really big parts of starting a consumer co-op is building the relationships like the ones that are in this room. I think to understand like how can we pull together multiple sources of funding in order to ensure that risk is a little bit lower for all, but I think overall the community is able to have control over how the store actually runs. So most of the models have primarily the control of how the cooperative works still sits with the consumers, even if there are multiple sources of funding.
So is it fair to say that the community development financial institutions, they receive monies perhaps from the federal government for projects such as a co-op?
Yes, absolutely. There are a few. There's a few different models. I think one of the gaps, which is actually actively being addressed right now, at the federal level, is making money more accessible to cooperatives. So there are a few different programs that are accessible to cooperatives. The main issue is education. People not understanding that a cooperative is just there's not one owner. There may be a few owners, or there in the case of a consumer co-op, there might be hundreds or thousands of owners, and that's actually better, right? Because that really mitigates risk. So is the education piece, the piece that you all are doing right now, that is really the most important piece to help funders become comfortable with that. So I think you have the support of like local government and an array of like financial institutions and service providers that it really helps to make people comfortable with the idea. And I think this approach of having several different rounds of both community voice and like hearings, presentations like this is really helpful to help people just get comfortable with the idea. So if you're not familiar with it, that's understandable.
So just to reiterate what the supervisor asked, at what point does local government enter into a partnership with the community for a business entity?
I think right from the beginning, I know for us, it really started right from the beginning, building relationships so that people understood what is the goal. If the goal is to create access to like fresh, healthy foods in an area, I think these maps of like how far the different grocery stores are, that's the partnership that is really helpful to help make the case for why this needs to happen, and also why it needs to be owned by the people that are in the community. So I would say the education relationship always needs to start right away. And then building the relationship so that over the course of a couple of years, while the consumer group is pulling together funds through membership dollars, that we're also able to pull together funds from like city or financial institutions in order to kind of like pull together the funds necessary to actually open the store.
Thank you. I'm going to bring you back in, Michael, but before, Jonathan, can you talk a little bit about your experience with either not-for-profit or for-profit entities that are partnered with local government? For Jonathan.
Sure. So just taking a step back, and everything we've been talking about so far has been about cooperatives, but I understand that there may be other options that are on the table, or at least that people want to discuss tonight. So one of those could be a nonprofit organization. And generally, when we talk about cooperatives, although there are aspects of those that we can consider nonprofit, for example, a lot of consumer cooperatives operate in a way that's arguably nonprofit, and there's an intended to be profit left over. They aren't nonprofits in the sense that we usually think of as nonprofit organizations. They're not organized as nonprofit corporations, and they don't get the tax exemption that nonprofit corporations get. And most typically, people think about 501c3 tax exempt nonprofits. So when we talk about a nonprofit or 501c3 nonprofit, that is different than a cooperative. And then we could also talk about more traditional business structures, which are just kind of what you most typically think of as a business, as a privately owned business that is not cooperatively owned. So I think one key difference is when we're talking about nonprofits, typically a major source of financing is donations and grants. That could be government grants, that could be grants from private foundations, and partly being eligible as a 501c3, having that special tax exempt status is what qualifies a nonprofit organization to access those sources of funding. So that's a much different funding model, very significantly different funding model than a privately owned business, which could be a more traditional privately owned business, or it could be a cooperatively owned business. Going back to your question of partnership with local communities, I think you can see a whole range of these things. Just like a cooperative can have a partnership with a local community, a nonprofit can have a partnership with a local community in a variety of different ways. There are situations where there might be publicly owned property, land, that is leased to a nonprofit, a community organization to operate, often at very low to no rent, depends on the situation. Could be situations where it's privately owned, where the nonprofit organization owns the property itself, but is supported by a local municipality in other ways. That could be financial support, that could be representation on the board of directors of the nonprofit. Could go on for a while, but I think there's a whole variety of ways in which a nonprofit, which is not a governmental entity, it's privately, it's run by a board of directors, which is not officially a town or municipality, but it can have very close connections that could be built into the DNA of the organization, that it serves a purpose of improving a specific community. In this case, it could be an organization organized specifically to empower residents of Fairview, and there could be governance structures that build in that connection from the get-go, that there's always going to be some representation on the board of directors from local officials or from other locally appointed people, and there could be a variety of other partnerships as well.
One of my goals was to use co-op as a way of training people to set up their own businesses, and providing people who are out of work with a chance to actually find employment by creating their own businesses. Has that model been used as sort of like a teaching initiative for the unemployed?
I don't have an answer.
But
I think it has. I think it has.
May I answer? Yes, absolutely. There are organizations not far from us, and we can. Oh, okay. Yes, the answer to that is absolutely yes. There are plenty of organizations, either in New York City or very close by, that offer an array of workshops that allow people that are interested in forming a cooperative learn all about it. Learn what is a worker cooperative, how it works, how you can organize one, how you can write the bylaws. What kind of business you can have. Most of the cooperatives, the worker cooperatives in New York City, are in the service industry. So you have elder care, you have child care, you have bookkeeping, translation, a whole array of businesses that are possible and that are worker-owned. So the workers, what do I mean by that? Each worker has an equal right to participate in the decision-making of the business. That is a worker-owned cooperative. And so I'll be happy to talk more about that, but okay, I wanted just to answer this question. There are organizations that are devoted to the development of worker cooperatives. Yes.
And business
Tasha,
incubators.
can we get Michael and the other people on the panel to answer that as well?
Sure. Michael, can you talk about business incubation at a co-op?
In other words, other businesses that share space with the cooperative,
Yes.
like bringing in a farmer's market sort of a deal where local growers sell their own wares. Sure, you can set up any model you really want to. You just have to have clear defined goals. The question about, people setting up their own businesses is probably separate from cooperative. Now, setting up worker-owned businesses, of course, they need to get training and advice and leadership along how to do that. But that's probably separate from the type of consumer co-op or even workers-owned cooperative that you're talking about. But if you have space enough and you can allow other vendors within there, then the co-op can agree to lease space You'd want to be careful about competing products within that, you know what I'm saying? So you wouldn't want, if you're selling certain things in the co-op store, you don't want a competitor in there that's going to undercut your sales or something like that. So you have to be careful, or just set guidelines for who you want to offer vendor space to. But all of that is possible. You can really have anything you want once you have clear defined goals, you know. So in Columbus, Ohio, where I live, there's the North Market, which is help funded by the city. It's a large market in downtown Columbus where there are a variety of vendors where you can get foods that you can't get anywhere else around town. So they're kind of specialty vendors within the North Market. And you can have specialty vendors within your market as well. But they would be separate from the co-op. And whether or not that they offer discounts to the co-op members for their wares would have to be something discussed, you know, by the members of the cooperative and the vendors coming in, things like that. So there's a lot to work out with all of that. But you can certainly have anything you want.
I think that's the most important takeaway here, but before I try to summarize what this portion of the panel, I do want to, for a moment of clarity, just read the definition of cooperative. It's a farm or business or other organization which is owned and run jointly by its members who share the profits or benefits. So what we're proposing is for everyone in this room, should they be interested, this is also a recruitment event, by the way, to participate in ownership of a business entity. Mostly we are talking about a food service provider, a food or service provider, but to Michael's point, and to Garrett's point, we do have supermarkets in the region. So perhaps what would go into this particular entity is a specialty market, a market that is supplied by local farmers. So the takeaway is that the curation of what this thing is completely available to all of us to determine that. The business incubation piece could be a part of an economic development cooperative that is owned by the people that live in the community. So I just wanted to kind of round out the questions and the presentation from Delia.
Could I just ask a follow-up, question? During the summer when we met, we said we want to reach out to the community and hear from the community what they want. Now, people who show up at a meeting represent one aspect of the community, but there's other people in the community who we're not hearing from. I'd like to ask the panel how we would best go about, surveying the community and what options we should probably be giving the community. So we could say, do we want to have a local farmers, that's option one. Option two could be something, totally different. And, because I think that would be really the next step.
Mel, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'd be happy to share a little from my own experience, and while I'm doing that, I'll just share. I'll share on the screen a co-op that just opened, and I think speaks to a lot of what you all are trying to do. I think in terms of community engagement, I will say I was recruited to my consumer co-op by attending a civic association meeting. And, this example, of Marsh in South St. Louis did something similar. They did outreach over the course of the year. They actually started outreach last year and opened this year on a very low scale. They have 160 members. I'll leave that up for a little bit just so you can take a look at the quote there. But I think it's realizing the opportunities that are already out there. So civic association meetings, anytime that there is a local event coming out. I personally tabled at many a festival to help engage the community and go to where the people are to understand what their challenges were, where they would want a grocery store to be located, what kinds of foods that they wanted there. Because it sounds like there are some grocery stores, there might be room for, some sort of specialty or some sort of like specific, like stock list that is specific to needs and gaps in the area. So I think really making use of different departments and different events that are happening is a really key way to make sure that you're engaging not just the people who can make a meeting, but also are able to, there are also people that are just kind of like already out there and engaged in different ways in the community. It took us quite a while to build up to 1,000, but as you can see, depending on the operating scale that you're looking at, you can get a smaller grocery store up pretty quickly.
Okay. And Jonathan, did you want to weigh in on that outreach?
I think the only thing I'd add, and I totally agree with everything Mo said, I think from what I've seen in different contexts, it may need to be a somewhat iterative process in that if you go out to a lot of community members and say, would you rather have this kind of business structure or that kind of business structure, and a couple other questions, without there's not a lot of context to those questions. I know there will be more context and there will be more meetings, et cetera, but these are not easy decisions to arrive at, right? You can't really come up with the right, in my mind at least, I don't think you can come up with the right business structure until you figured out the business model. You figured out what the project is, what the project hopes to accomplish, how the project's going to be financed, how do you figure out how to make the ends meet, right? Because if it's not self-sustaining, whether that's self-sustaining as a nonprofit that relies on grants and donations, or self-sustaining as a for-profit business or profit-owned business on the basis of revenue coming in to meet expenses, if it's not going to be self-sustaining in some way, it's not going to work. And understanding how you get to a business model that works is going to inform the legal structure and the business structure. So I don't think it works to necessarily go out and say, what does the community want? Do you want this structure, that structure, or the third structure? So at some point there has to be a group of people that is doing the work of the business modeling and the finance modeling and making it work. But at the same time, you don't want it to be that it's just a small group that's doing it without any community input. So I'm not sure I have a magic solution of how this all plays out, but I think there has to be both of those, and it's iterative. And as Mo said, many of these things take a long time, I think partly for that reason, because there's a lot of detailed work and effort that's going to go into coming up with a business model that works, but there's also, you need community output, and those have to kind of work in both directions. That would be my addition.
There's questions from the audience. You just made me think of something, because the supervisor's initiative to have business incubation, he actually mentioned it, having it at our community center, having that housed there. And the food co-op or the worker co-op or what that entity is that we decide to do would be potentially housed on the 119 corridor, where that zoning allows for so many things to be built. So to your point, Michael, and to the supervisor's question, we could have both. Are they going to be housed at the same place? They don't have to be. But we could have both within this zone. So we are gonna break for questions, but I just want to get a couple of more questions to the panel. And then there's a question from the days. And a question from the Zoom. So we are going to break for questions in another 15 minutes. And before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about what we mentioned in the intro, community benefits. So if we were to say which business model in your experience provides the best community benefit for equitable or for equity, for equitable enterprise or for equity, which one would you say? Cooperative, not-for-profit, board, for-profit?
For the whole panel?
Yes. Go ahead, Mo.
I mean, I'm very biased towards cooperatives. I think, particularly for grocery stores, I have generally seen that a multi-stakeholder model is really incredibly helpful, both for benefit benefiting the community at large, all the people that are going to shop at the grocery store, and also for the workers that are there, right? Because the workers of the grocery store that's very labor intensive work, and it's important to ensure that those people have their needs being met as well. And I think to the point of, I apologize, I can't remember exactly who pointed at this, but the idea of like helping people to start their own businesses, the idea of skill building, things like that, like a cooperative really does give opportunities for people to understand how to run a business, whether you're a consumer or a worker within the cooperative. There's so many opportunities to partake in, how does the business run, and like what needs to happen in the business, and what kind of products you offer. So there's many different ways for people to understand kind of like the financial side of it, because by right of being a cooperative, you're meeting often, there's a certain level of transparency that I think is very helpful in terms of community benefit and input.
Okay, Jonathan, do you agree?
I agree, although I think my answer to the question of what is the best is maybe a pickle answer, which is it depends, and there is no best. It depends on they're very different, and different models do different things. It depends what we're talking about when we say community benefit. If the goal is building wealth in the sense of building wealth through ownership of an enterprise, that's something that's possible with a worker-owned cooperative, for example. But by definition, workers owning an enterprise, if the enterprise is successful, then they can build wealth through that ownership. A nonprofit, on the other hand, by definition, no one owns it. There is no private ownership. So if the goal is to build wealth for a small number of people that are working for the organization, you can have employees of a nonprofit, but the goal is not to build wealth in that sense of generating profit for them. On the other hand, a nonprofit can build wealth in other ways. A nonprofit, has to serve the public interest, and it could build wealth by serving as a nonprofit incubator. And a lot of business incubators are nonprofit organizations, and it can build wealth that way by helping other people develop and incubate and grow their own businesses. Or it could build wealth in the sense of, maybe making fresh food available at reduced prices that might not be possible without that nonprofit model and the subsidy that you get through grants and donations and whatnot. So I don't think there's this is the best thing for community empowerment, for benefiting the community. It's very different ways of doing very different things. And then, consumer cooperative is a different model as well. Mo mentioned multi-stakeholder cooperative, so you could have both, an organization that's both consumer-owned and worker-owned. Let's say just a purely consumer-owned cooperative, it exists for the benefit of the consumers who shop there. So it's not building wealth in the same sense of focusing entirely on the workers, but it is, providing community benefit in the sense of hopefully providing food at a low cost to community members that want to be involved in the cooperative.
So let me take a stab at this question from a different direction. Let's look at the pros, one pro from each of you or two pros from each of you, and the cons for, say, a for-profit supermarket, a for-profit food business to the community. What would be a pro? What would be a con? Besides the obvious, providing food.
And when you say for-profit, do you mean one that's not a cooperative?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say one could be that in a for-profit food business could range from, quote-unquote mom and pop owned grocery store where the owner of the business is a community member to a Stop and Shop or, a publicly traded supermarket chain, right? Those are all for-profit, privately owned businesses, but there can be a huge range of differences. But I think one potential benefit is if there is a individual or a group that wants to start a private business enterprise and they're motivated to do so here, then they can bring their resources to doing that. So if a concern is, well, we're going to bring this together as a community, it's going to take a very long time. We're trying to figure out how to get this going. If there's someone who has the resources, has the money, wants to do it, and they want to start their own business, then bringing them in, maybe that's a faster way to do things, and maybe it's a way to rely on using that business owner's resources. But obviously, there are downsides to that as well, but which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think that could be one potential advantage. And I've seen at least one example where a nonprofit community development group in a city was trying to meet the need that was voiced by residents to bring a supermarket into what was perceived as a food desert. And what they eventually did was there was a piece of property owned by the nonprofit community group they leased to a major chain, like one of the well-known major supermarket chains. And so there was not community ownership in the sense of actually operating the business, but there was, in a more indirect sense, some community ownership in that they got rental payments from this supermarket chain for this property owned by the nonprofit, and they used those rental payments and the income from that to fund some other community program.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And any pros and cons, I'll give this to Michael. What did you see as the greatest benefit of the worker co-op model? And what was the greatest con, in your opinion?
Again, consumer co-ops is what I was more involved with, so I'll speak to that if that's okay. So, you know, just the obvious, it's empowerment, it's a say-so in how things are run, you have a voice. Hopefully you're getting product at a lower cost, hopefully a better quality product as well. And you have ownership and empowerment in that to whatever level you want. You know, certain members of a co-op never go to meetings, that they just only take advantage of the lower prices or the quality of product. In other instances, people attend every meeting and they want a voice in the way things are run and what products are carried, how decisions are made and things like that, and who makes those decisions. So it's very empowering, a consumer co-op. You have a stake in what's going on at the store that you shop at. And a con of it is that sometimes very few people end up doing a whole lot of the work to keep the co-op running. That there is resentment, there are different, but you can, you know, ways around that though are to have different levels of membership within the co-op structure, and benefits go along with different levels of membership and such like that. So other cons are that it's sometimes they start out small, so it's hard to compete price-wise with a privately owned enterprise that has much larger buying power from the get-go, or better resources to buy more bulk and therefore better prices, things like that. So you know, I always favor consumer co-ops. Like Mo, I'm a little biased towards that. Like she is towards worker co-ops. And I just like the co-op structure. I think it's much more empowering, and it allows you to own where you shop.
Have you seen problems where, say, a food co-op is placed near, you know, relatively near a regular larger size, you know, supermarket, and, you know, could specialty co-ops be successful even if they're, you know, within a mile or so from a supermarket?
It's tough to compete with the big guys or the big stores. It just simply is. It's price-wise. So you have to have a niche, whatever that niche might be. Again, better quality products. You can hopefully match pricing or not be that much more expensive. But when they're buying, you know, such large bulk, and you have 100 members and they have 1,000 people shopping a day there. It's hard to compete price-wise with that. Again, unless you have specialty items. You know, the co-ops I was involved with were special because back before organic or whole foods were as mainstream as they have become, we started carrying whole grains, whole flours, a variety of beans, dried fruits, organic product in the early 70s, mid 70s, early 80s, before it got into more the mainstream. And that's why a lot of the co-ops that I worked with were successful, but why also they went under was because the larger grocery chains started carrying similar product at lower prices.
And I just have one follow-up question. Has there ever been instances where a co-op would work with, say, a larger supermarket where there could be sort of like a section in the supermarket or in a business that would be reserved for, for a co-op? so it wouldn't be direct competition, but it might be easier to benefit from their business.
I'm not aware of any such model.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be, certain brands, like Equal Exchange comes to mind, where you might see, like Equal Exchange Coffee. They're a worker cooperative and they have a particular brand in it, but I would agree, there's not many, it kind of like defeats the purpose of the overall, the idea of the co-op is to like have the ownership. I would agree with a lot of what Michael said. I think the one thing that I would add is that, the difference between, a regular grocery store, they'll be able to come in at a lower price point. A cooperative, if you're gaining membership, you have a certain amount of clientele that has an investment within the business, right? So if I shop at my co-op and we make above a certain amount of money, then like I'm gonna get patronage back, right? I'm gonna get money back. So there's an incentive to shop at that grocery store. There's certainly a very a balance between like having a lot of the co-ops do like organic, healthy foods, but there's also a balance. You have to have like accessibly priced items, and there's definitely a lot of work to be done in terms of figuring out what works, and that's very dependent on where the cooperative is. But I think having, when we're able to say, there are 1,000 people that are committed to shopping at the store. I think at my grocery store, it's like 60% of the sales are just for members. You're able to quantify those things and really understand trajectories. It doesn't always work out, but there are hard numbers that you can lean on in terms of.
Okay, I have two last questions.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but a comment. I'd like to take a step backwards for a minute and to talk about how this whole thing gets started. It originally got started because people in the Fairview area did not have low-cost, convenient, and good quality food in the area. And what I think it is incumbent upon us to present you with all the options. And then once you know what all the options are, then you could tell us what direction you want to travel in. Tonight, we have heard about nonprofit, worker-owned, community-owned, typical traditional supermarket. We talked about organization within the co-op structure to train people. I think what we need to do is look at the pros and cons of each type of opportunity. And then once evaluating the pros and cons for each opportunity, then you as a community could say, after looking at all the options, this is where we should go. I don't think it is up to, at least my feeling, I don't think it's up to me to tell you where you should go as a community. I see my responsibility is to clearly outline all the options. You know what the pros and cons are, because any one of these have its drawbacks. You could get a big supermarket that give you what you want, but that's money that's being sucked out of the community and going elsewhere. But you have convenience of a large supermarket. So that's the pro and the con. You have the various pros and the cons of the various co-ops we talked about. So I think it's important that as a community, you ask questions about the pros and the cons, because none of what we said tonight is perfect. So we need feedback for what you think is the best way to go.
Perfect segue. We're about to.
And I'm not
Yes.
biased, but I was part of the board.
Yes.
I need to say something, okay? and I've been signaling to you for a while, Tasha, and I don't appreciate it. Okay, listen, I'm going to go one step further back from what Walter said. What we need to find out is what the need, want, and desires of the Fairview community is. And then
Absolutely.
we can go, the next step is to go figure it out, how it fits into one of these models.
Absolutely.
And so right now, we're talking about these models, which it's one step further away from where we want to be listening to, which is the needs, the wants, and desires of the Fairview community.
Absolutely.
You know, and we're spending too much time looking at the pros and cons of something we've kind of put forth and decided on without finding out what they need.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to pass it on to community members here.
I think there was a question over here. Yeah, if you could, you leave it at the podium and people could walk up. Thank you.
I mean, I think you touched on it when you talked about the pros and the cons. I know a little bit about co-ops just because I have friends who have shopped at them, but what I wasn't clear on is exactly what it is and what type of commitment and time
Yes.
that it would take. It's great to like something and want to do something, but then when people say, yeah, but you need to spend 10 hours a month doing this,
Right.
then it's like, oh, wait, I don't want to do that. So I think what you mentioned in terms of sort of modeling it for us, I know you can't necessarily go all the way into the detail because that costs money to do a model like that, but to really let us know, listen, we can go this way, and this is the time, because some of them said it takes a little bit of time to get these things up. This is the time it's going to take. This is the reality of it. Or you can have a supermarket in the next year. But just let us know what it really looks like in terms of what the commitment from the community is, because I know that whether we do the worker co-op situation or, I forgot the two terms that you
Consumer
used,
co-op.
but it will take something from the community, it will take time and effort from the community
And money.
to participate. And money, and that too. And also, the other part that he mentioned is modeling it, is this going to be financially viable with the amount of population we have, with the cost of the food? And then the only other last thing I did want to say in mentioning co-ops is, I think some of them have sort of a sustainability portion to it, meaning you don't go in there and buy one little thing of oatmeal or one little thing of cashew nuts. Like, you can scoop it out so you don't have as much packaging. So that's just another part of it, but just looking at the whole thing in terms of pros and cons so that we can make a decision, because it's like what looks great and shiny and then what's the reality of it. So that's
I really appreciate that. I'm going to hold my comments to the end. Please come to the podium.
Come up.
I can't, I'm on Zoom.
Yes, absolutely, thank you.
Is it permissible for me to speak?
So just, Tasha, if I could, this is with the moderation and for those on Zoom. If we could do perhaps 2 questions live from the auditorium, and then I have definitely people on the Zoom that have questions, so maybe we'll alternate.
Okay.
So Ms. Weems, thanks for your patience. We're going to do one more live question from the auditorium, and we will turn it over to the Zoom, and I'll call out on residents. So thank you.
Thank you. This is a question for Mr. Brennan. Greenberg has been, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Greenberg has been a hostile place for food businesses to move. We have had a tough time over the last few decades attracting those sort of businesses, and the ones that have come here have not had a great deal of success. And I think it is in part because of poor planning, but it's also policies and sort of enforcement structures that make it very difficult, impractical, expensive, time-consuming to operate a business of any sort, really, in Greenberg. I started a business here 13 years ago with the intention of hiring and building a business here. I've hired 33 people and have only really been able to have one in, that lives in the town of Greenberg. Because, and we've had to go elsewhere because of some of these impediments. So I guess my question is this: I mean, what are the things that we need to do to give this sort of initiative the potential to be successful? What are the things that the town needs to do to create an environment where this can be successful? And I don't want to go too long, but I'll give you an example. I mean, for us, some of the policies that have really made transportation a very difficult thing. I think one is we're just woefully under-supported in terms of public transportation, which is why we have a difficult time, my company has a difficult time hiring people. And also, it tends to mean that we hire people, hire socioeconomic, situations because they have a car, and we don't want to do that. But I guess, so the other thing is, the town doesn't do any planning when it comes to road paving and projects. And so, for us, we establish an office and then we have unexpected disruptions. I mean, that seems like it could be very disruptive to a cooperative if, they're on Route 119. It's not it's not well-served by public transportation. It, they have an unexpected or an unplanned, sort of project that disrupts the flow of traffic, and it could really, hurt the potential for success. So I guess I say those things because I don't know how much you know about our town, but, I just wonder, Mr. Brennan, do you find that, when you have an area that has difficulty for commercial food businesses to be successful, do these sort of cooperatives tend to thrive in those because there's less competition, or be challenged because they don't have as much capital and resources and so on?
Yeah, good question.
Yes to both questions, and most co-ops I know are not on major commercial throughways. They are neighborhood stores. They are active in the community. They're not on the main commercial drag of the community, unless it's a very small community and you have other small stores along there. It can be successful, and those types of interruptions interrupt any type of business. You could be in a neighborhood store and have disruption. So disruptions occur. It's just a part of doing business. You want good access, though. Like on a bus route or a walking route or something like that. It certainly helps. Especially if it's a food desert. And some of the issues are that some of the members of the community have difficulty getting, to a store even a mile or a mile and a half away. Then you want to make sure that it's accessible. You want to have delivery set up. I mean, there's all kind of ways to answer, problems that come up. You just have to build it into your structure to take care of that. If you're a grocery store or that type of thing, you can certainly make delivery available. You can. Again, that makes another job for somebody to make the deliveries. So
they need a car, right?
or a bicycle. So yeah, there's all kind of ways to do it.
Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So now we're going to the Zoom question.
Okay, great. So I definitely identified a few comments and questions via the chat, so we'll get to those in a moment. But I think Ms. Weems and Ms. Cherico both have questions they'd like to verbalize. So let's start with Ms. Weems. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm happy to make this meeting. I've been missing them all so dearly. I'm making my first one. And so far, I like what I hear. You're presenting the problems that I find that we're going to face in this area of called location. During a 25-year town comprehensive plan, I don't think we included anyone in this community that would use anything. And since there was no representation, we're at this point like, I'm glad you brought up the 119 corridor. Just what property lines do we have that we can look at and say we can use that are on that corridor of 119 and provide transportation? That's one. Two, for those people like me who are sole proprietors, I own Creative Designs, which is a full-service florist. I belong to FTD and I belong to Teleflora also. But here in unincorporated Greenburgh, you have Gray Rock, you have one in Elmsford, and that's the only two listed, and myself, but I'm listed out of Hawthorne. My office is in Hawthorne. I don't have any place that I can afford to use on that 119 corridor. Not only am I a minority, I've been here for ages. My clientele, I have a good clientele list, but I can't afford to pay the rent So when we discuss being a cooperative, I was thinking I also have the opportunity to buy into a part of this membership, but I can't do it if it's not in a location that I can easily compete. Right here in Fairview, I have like 15 churches that I sell to. That's every Sunday, but I have to do it from Hawthorne and bring it in. But since COVID-19, I closed my shop as soon as I knew there was no incoming, sales. And pure the COVID-19 closed down a lot of things, and one was the florist industry. So now, taking all of that into consideration, taking into consideration the lack of assistance from the town, doing anything that's constructive to help the minorities get into businesses, buy co-ops, cooperatives, and do things, I'm quite sure whatever we plan to do, as long as we have the location in which to do it, it can be done.
Yes.
If you notice, it's all automobiles that I can't afford. So I'm just saying, that is probably our main problem. Where could we put up? Where's the land left? Now, see, all along the corridor, 119, all of those businesses, all of those very expensive BMW, Jaguar, all of them, they're under the urban renewal plan. And my taxes went up. So, that's what I'm saying. The main issue is location, location, location. I'm quite sure if you put a supermarket here, the gentleman before who was speaking about the impossibility of putting anything in without transportation, he's right. You'll either go from White Plains over to Elmsford, and that ends that 119 corridor. Well, there's a Terrytown bus that goes down. So all of these things we have to take into consideration. How can I make money, pay my sales tax, and make a profit along with my membership? I think I'm capable of doing that. If I'm still in business, don't ask me how, but I am. So it is doable, but we need to look at all of these things and try to figure out how can we keep our rent down the same way they are doing it for all those cars companies, and what can we expect from the town? So far, I've expected nothing, and I've received nothing since the 25-year comprehensive plan, which had not one black person on that committee. So everybody who was on that committee was speaking for me, and I was not given an opportunity to speak for myself, and I took the land usage training presented by the county in 2009, I think, 2000, somewhere around there, and I still wasn't permitted to get onto that committee. So now, a lot is expected of this group, and I hope y'all can come up with something that we can use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Jericho?
Yes, I'm unmuted now.
Just a minute, I think I need to correct the records.
Well, can we
Yeah.
move that to the end?
All right.
Can we just write it down?
Yeah.
I think it needs to be corrected now.
No, I want to correct the record now. Two things that was said that is just untrue, that there was no blacks in the comprehensive plan. I was a member of the comprehensive plan for an entire session of 8 years. The other point was that there is no representation of anyone on the planning board from Manhattan Avenue. We had a vacancy on the planning board that I announced for over a year. I announced that a vacancy, encouraged people to apply. The town board announced that for over a year, for people to apply. No one from that community applied. So I just want to correct those two statements.
Ms. Jericho?
No, I'm sorry, do I have the opportunity to make a rebuttal?
No,
Okay?
No.
Because I'm just gonna say that's not true.
Pat, respectfully, this is no need to defend or rebut. We're going to move to Ms. Cherico.
Okay. All right, I can go?
Yes.
All right, Louise Cherico, and I'm a resident of 33 Oak Street, and right in Fairview, right on Manhattan Avenue. And for the last several years, I have been surveying my community and talking about what we need here as far as a supermarket, as far as bringing in fresh food, as far as the co-op. I've been having these conversations. And, you know, the one thing with the co-op is that a lot of people aren't just poor sitting around at home with nothing to do. People work all day. It's mostly a working class community. People have full-time jobs, 2 jobs. People are raising children. We have disabled people. We have elderly people in my community. And we have people that are lower income, that even lower income than me. And they're just caught up in the daily grind of life, the daily trauma of living. How am I going to do this? How am I going to find a sitter for my kid so I can go back to school? Nobody's going to have time. Very, very few people will be willing or able. I don't want to say not willing, because that's not fair. It sounds like people don't want to do anything. So people will not be able to volunteer in anything to work. And I understand that. It's my understanding, and you can clear it up after, that there is a fee to join the co-op. And depending on if you work hours, what you pay is, according, like you could go in a co-op and shop, but you just don't get as much of a discount or any discount if you don't put in hours.
Yes.
Also, you don't get paid to work in the co-op. Those are volunteer hours you're putting in. So that's another issue. If somebody's got to ask, particularly in this neighborhood, the kids, my daughter's not going to work. She wants money. She's 16. She wants to buy a car. She has no time to put in 10, 15 hours of volunteer time while going to school. So on top of that, in talking about what kind of foods, what the community wants, is not specialty. And I don't know what you mean by specialty foods, but nobody wants a co-op to, or anything, even a farmer's market, where people are going to come in and sell, honey, maple syrup for $16, goat cheese, fancy cheeses, this and that.
Thank you, Louise.
Okay.
Thank you. I think you really helped us with the cons to co-op.
Okay, but I'd like to just add one more sentence. What people have told me is that they are very, very open to having a farmer's market on a Saturday, just like every other town has it. It's not going to distract from any other town. Nobody gets on a bus to go to Tarrytown. They want it right here in Greenburgh during a weekend when people can go during hours that are long enough for people to go. Can't be on a Sunday.
Okay.
This is day
Thank
winter.
you.
And they want fresh fish, vegetables, they want foods that serve the African-American community.
Thank you.
No pork, and we want to bring in also our small business people to sell their goods.
Thank you, Louise. We have to take another question or comment.
Yes, that's.
And this is not the last opportunity for you to speak.
Tasha, if I may.
Yes.
I'd love to share just a little bit. First of all, I want to thank particularly Patricia and the last one that was speaking. I think you really hit on some very important points. I think there are there's a little demystifying that I would like to do about co-ops, is that there's no set structure, right, in terms of hours, in terms of the kinds of foods. I think it was Louise, you were saying, it sounds like you've done a lot of work, right, to understand what are the needs of the people, like fresh fish. That's exactly right. It's like knowing exactly what are the kinds of foods that people want to have. It is crucially important to making sure that it's successful, and knowing things like, I think my co-op, we don't do hours at all because it just doesn't make sense. Like no one around where we are can do that. So we adopted a different model. So I think stepping back from co-op, non-profit, whatever, there's certain just basic like market research that will need to be done no matter what, to understand like where things should be, what things should be. I know our co-op started for several years with just a buyer's club, which is effectively like a farmer's market, right? So working people up to it. It's like you just come like once a week. You come and you know like what you're gonna get, and you it involves a lot of like local vendors. So it really is. I think the benefit of the co-op model is that you have a lot of input in that about what it does look like and what are the aspects that are most important to the people that are closest to the issues and the gaps right now.
Thank you.
I was wondering if I had to press the button.
You could pick it up.
Maybe pick it up?
You could pick it up.
All right. How's this? Good. All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm new to Greenberg. Thank you. So the reason why I'm at this meeting is because I got a letter in the mail, and then Theater Young sent an email. So I said, oh, this must be important, so I should come, So I live close to Manhattan Avenue, so I don't live on Manhattan Avenue, and please forgive me for my ignorance if I missed something. I came a little late, but I need a little clarity on exactly what this is for, because my biggest concern as a parent of 4 children is safety, and me working in the Bronx and commuting and living here, one of the biggest things that I see is by having a small store, sometimes without noticing, that could create issues. And my question is, if there is a store that is going to be put on Manhattan Avenue, what are the hours of operation? What are the things that are going to be sold, like alcohol or anything like that? Because that is problematic for me. I'm listening and hearing what are some of the needs in the community. Granted, I shouldn't be the one that speaks necessarily for the community since I'm new, but I will say I go to Acme, that's not that far, and I go to Trader Joe's. But if we're thinking about what in the immediate area, that young lady that just spoke, speaking of the farmer's market, on my drive home, I noticed that the town hall said September 30th, we're going to have a farmer's market inside. So I've been looking forward to that because I've participated in the one that's by the Hartsdale train station and different things like that. And I think that that's great for the community. And even though she says she doesn't want goat cheese and honey, I actually might like that because it brings versatility, and Acme doesn't have that. And I appreciate her trying to talk about the African American community, but I myself is African American and Latina, and I might want some things that are not the typical, I guess, expectation of what the African American and Hispanic community is. And I would like to try different things that could expose my children. And I like different salamis and different cheeses. I like different wines. So, and I eat pork. But what I wanted to say is I appreciate that, because there are people that will not be able to dedicate that time. I myself, working mom, I am an adjunct professor. I do a lot of different things, juggling lots of many hats, But what I do want to say is that my number one concern is safety, and that how does that really affect the community by having a store. I know you were referring to a for-profit idea, and by having a big store come in, how much control will the community actually have once we maybe lease a space? And when you say co-op, and that other woman spoke about having a florist business, how does that really work? Like, is she going to buy in, and then the community will reap benefits on our taxes, or only the members that buy in are reaping the benefits? Because then I don't understand why are we having this meeting if only the people that are selected to be at that table are going to make the benefit or receive the benefit. So I'm trying to understand that. That's the ignorance part of it. But if I had an option to have a seat at the table, I would say the farmer's market too, on the weekend, and some locally farmers, but also the honey and the cheese. And I would also say incorporating our youth in employment so that they have an opportunity to see how things are grown and brought to the table, but then also I have participated in Tasty Tuesdays, and I don't know if everyone knows that, but that's at the Theater Young Center before COVID. But nevertheless, we have a lot of talented cooks in our community that could really bring some of the flavors of the community, which could be African American or Latina or Asian or Indian or whatever it is, because we have a large African American community, but on my block, I have Jewish, I have Italian, I have, Jamaican, it's a melting pot of so many different cultures, and I think that it's great to incorporate, minorities, but we have to be an inclusive community so that we also involve everyone, so that even if I'm not familiar with an Asian flair, bring it to me because I want to try it. So I just want us to make sure that we do that, but we incorporate our youth and we think about safety. Would it
make any sense to have like a professional survey, like a needs that would be conducted where we could really get a sense what the community really wants? And, the other issue that, I'm sort of thinking at is the whole nature of business is changing. So, right now, we could open up a food co-op, and then a year from now, there could be another supermarket coming in, and then the co-op could go under. So when we're planning for a co-op, maybe we should also anticipate what could happen a year from now, what could happen a year from now or whatever. So this way we have the best chance of making this co-op, as successful as possible. So I think, my suggestion, for whatever it's worth, is let's say we. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry.
I have my hand up there.
Profit for just the people at the table, or is it
Understood, Tasha, I think so. We're going to two questions and then two to.
Garrett,
The young lady who just spoke, ask a
Tasha,
question.
can I address the question? The question was, is it only for the people that are at the table, or is it for the whole community? The question really is, it depends on what you set up as a structure. Structures can be, like a workers' co-op is just the worker, can be just the workers that own it, which could be 10 to 15 people. You can have a hybrid, which has classes of ownership, which are workers, who get benefits based on the amount they work. That's one model. You can also have membership owners, community owners, and you can even have an outside investment part. So it really depends on how you want to structure it, okay? So it's not cast in granite. This thing is actually flexible, and there are models all over the place. Our committee over the last couple months, I think, has researched a whole bunch of this, even the origin of some of these, which goes all the way back to Spain. Actually, where the workers' co-ops actually came from originally. They actually came from the Basque region of Spain. But how you do it and how you involve the community, the most important thing to me, there's a reason we don't have a supermarket in Fairview. It failed. Okay? So what we need to do, it failed. We had an A&P, okay? It failed, okay? A&P failed nationally, went out of business. But the most important thing is, and the idea of the empowerment zone that Tasha talked about in the beginning, is we want people to be in control of their own destiny. So the only reason we want this thing should go under is if the community doesn't support it. The way to get them to support it is to have them have some kind of vested interest, potentially, in the supermarket, in the store. That's the concept. How that manifests itself is very much dependent on how much time people have, how much commitment people have, what capital is available to people. We're still in the early planning stages. It's still just a lump of clay. That's all it is right now, okay?
There's no actual funds
Not now.
to support this.
Not yet, but one thing that we do know is there are funds available for food deserts. And there are federal funds available, okay? For what is considered a food desert, which means a place that doesn't have a supermarket.
And it
Okay.
actually,
Is this area considered a food desert?
It may be, we don't know yet.
I would encourage the speakers to come to the microphone because people who are on virtual can't hear you, but please feel free to come to the microphone.
So I guess I have a few questions. The first part is this just open to the community of Fairview, or is it open to the town of Greenburgh? I hear people mentioning, and most people here in the audience, they seem to know a lot about what's going on. I actually received an email this morning saying that there's going to be a town hall. So I think the first part is us finding a way to communicate it to everyone, if everyone is being included. That's what we have to figure out. I know this is the town of Greenberg, but within Greenberg, we have a lot of different things going on. So, like me, for example, I live in Elmsford, but I received the email this morning from Theodore Young that there's a town meeting. So I think the first thing is to figure out who is actually involved in all of this. Do you want to incorporate everyone? I know I live in Elmsford, but I do shop in the Fairview area. But I think that's where we need to start. Ultimately, I know how cooperatives work, but is everyone in the community going to benefit? I think you'll have more longevity in it. If everyone is included, if it's just going to be 10 people making decisions for everyone, if everyone didn't decide that, it's not going to last, like an A&P, like a Warbounds, who are no longer in our community, okay? So, Acme is around the corner, but they're still there, there's always been a supermarket over there, so we need to figure out what exactly is going on. I know a person mentioned a lot of people in the Fairview community are working class people, so it is difficult for them to always participate, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to be involved. So I think that's what we kind of have to figure out before that. I actually thought it was a town hall meeting, and this was one of the agendas, and I was coming to complain about something else. So please, if you could tell me when the next one is, and complain about that.
In the interest of time, we are at 7:48. We are now looking to the Zoom for,
to talk, my hand been up for a while.
I understand, Cliff.
we're now
Just
looking to
following-
Zoom for a question.
Yes, so we're just following protocol. We're doing 2 questions from Zoom, 2 live in the auditorium. So at this point, we're back to Zoom. So Cliff, thank you for your patience, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to put a point of information, and probably Mr. Lloyd having got the transparency from the town board. A year ago, I put an application in to be on the planning board. And I like Mr. Finer probably to answer when I finish. I asked Mr. Finer, was there any opening to the planning board? He told me I need to put into a resume. I gave a resume to our town clerk, Judith Paville. And on the letterhead, I said that I would probably be a good candidate because my perspective is different than most people that y'all are picking to be on the planning board. This was a year ago. I asked and I gave Mr. Finer another email saying, hey, nobody never got back in touch with me. So Mr. Lloyd saw it. I'm from Fairview.
I never saw that.
And then they said, oh, well, nobody still haven't gotten back in touch with me. I gave a resume for the Human Rights Committee. I'm on the Human Rights Committee. I'm trying to find out why nobody never got back in touch with me when it came to the planning board, and I did everything that Mr. Finer told me I needed to do.
Cliff, when we adjourn this meeting, can they answer that?
My point, I just wanted to bring that up because he brought up that nobody asked
Thank you.
to be on the
That's right.
planning board.
That's right.
And I wanted to give a point of information that I did.
Thank
It was a
you.
year ago. So I
Thank
needed
you.
to bring that up because he said it wasn't, and I want some clarity on that. Secondly,
I'll provide clarity.
let me just get my time in before they end up saying, or Tasha stopped me from doing what I need to say. Secondly, is that Manhattan Avenue, the woman just got finished talking to say she's new. I see she is new because there's nowhere to put a store on Manhattan Avenue that I know of. 119, there've been nothing but high-end car dealership that been built on 119. Nobody from the community is getting any work in the high car-end dealerships. We could have a loop bus. They have buses they call loop that could come through, and I mentioned this before at the town board meeting, that could come through Manhattan Avenue as a loop on Old Terrytown Road and Norwood Road to the right side of, I don't know if the town have anything to do with this, but from that, what is the gas? It's a thing right by Norwood Road. It's a golf range. It's a golf course. There's a big area there that I haven't seen been used in over 15 years. Maybe we could find out who owns that and how that could be used.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a big area that nobody used. And it's walking distance that people can go to. And to the gentleman that said that none of the stores like A&P and Walbonds and Pathmark, but they still have, even though A&P went out, they have Acme. Acme bought them out. And I was like saying, why was the one kept on Norwood Road, but wasn't kept on 119?
Okay.
And my last question, Tasha Young, is that
Yes, sir.
who are the one? Because Garrett is the community development person, commissioner. I've been talking to him for years about how do people get jobs, because they coming with the sidewalks. They got all these initiatives coming on, and nobody from Fairview is getting any work. Who choose to be that? And my last thing, they building the senior citizen. That's going up. Why is nobody from Fairview is getting any work? They have a thing called Section 3 that say that people from the community should get work. These things, who's in charge of that? But before you cut me off, Tosh, I would like what Mr. Finder asked to answer the question I said that I gave a resume up. And why was I never called in for an interview? Thank you.
Okay, at 8 o'clock, if we could do that at 8 o'clock. What Cliff just, thank you, Cliff. What he just brought to the discussion is the need for local hiring. And that is part of the empowerment that we're trying to have in this initiative. This is not open to Northern Elmsford or different parts of the town at this time. But what we do have the opportunity to do is use this as the precedent for how we do enterprise empowerment zones in the town, and then go to Northern Elmsford, go to Hartsdale Four Corners, go to Central Avenue areas on Edgemont that are blighted, because we do have blight in the town. So we do have to look at filling empty storefronts, working with landowners, and using our land in a way that the community gets the biggest benefit. And one of those ways is community investment, but it's not the only way. So I do want to just acknowledge that we are at 6 minutes to 8, and in respect for everyone's time, I am also a working person, as everyone here is. Families, we do need to end on time. I want to let everyone know, this is a process. This is community engagement, and this is what it is. It's everything that we experienced tonight. It is following up with a summary of this meeting with a clear explanation for the differences of what was presented tonight. If it wasn't clear, we can take time to send that out in an electronic communication. We need everyone on Zoom to put their contact information in the chat so we can capture it. Everyone that's here in the room, same thing. This is a recruitment opportunity also. Anyone that is interested in how the land is being developed in Fairview, this is the group that you should be a part of. This is the Fairview Empowerment Group. You see that the planning professionals for the town is here, the supervisor is supportive, the zoning board of appeals is supporting this initiative. So please join the group. If you have a little bit of time to offer, we have something to do for you. If you have a lot of time to offer, we certainly have something that you can do. So I just wanted to let everyone know, this is the first entry into community engagement. We had to spend time educating because we have to understand what it is that we're talking about. Perfect question, thank you. Thank you. So by signing your contact, you're going to get a follow-up email from us for the next Zoom. All of our meetings pretty much are on Zoom, and we welcome you. You brought so much to the discussion. Everyone that commented, including Mr. Cliff Abrams, brought so much to the discussion. So we welcome you to continue to be involved with this committee. Leading up to this presentation, we met weekly. We probably will meet at a pretty frequent basis while we're getting started. And for those of you that are startup people, please come on board. For those of you that like to join after the thing is already a thing, we need you too, but please keep in touch with us. I'm so glad to have young people here. We want you to continue to engage with us, so please come again and join.
Do you have an opportunity for people to write down their name and email address?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
everybody.
Excuse me, before we break up, Manny, did you want to say something? Yeah. Manny is a member of our committee. He's just sitting down there.
I'm just shy.
Oh, boy.
No, I wanted to add to Tasha. She kind of encapsulated it really well. You know, we all have different ideas and different concerns. So, you know, if you come forward and you step into our group, we can break out in groups that will address those different concerns. okay? But we need numbers, because, you know, if we are rehashing everything that we hear from the community in a small group, that's not the way you get the the benefit of the crowdsourcing. You get it by getting people involved, and then it's a possibility to break out into different groups that are addressing different concerns. So please, we want you, and talk to your neighbors.
Yes.
This is a process of communication that should not be just handled by a few members of the community or the town. It's a process that has to be involve everyone. Please, talk to your neighbors, say, I had a great time there, I spoke my mind, you know. Anyways, and we got some good information. Thank you, and Tasha, thank you very much.
Okay.
Tasha, I just wanted to thank a couple of people who have been kind of quiet tonight. Nadia in the back, who did an awful lot of work. This meeting never would have happened without Nadia. Johan, who tries to be quiet, but when he says something, it means a lot to as well. And Kristen, who kept a group of people, there were, I think, 8 of us with about 12 opinions, kept us together, so I want to thank you. And Mr. Finer, who also puts up with us on a weekly basis, and I'm not sure how.
Okay. I would just like to add that I don't know how many of you saw the president's address this afternoon, just recently, in terms of COVID. One of the sad things that in communities of color, there is a very low vaccination rate. And everything that we have said tonight will have little meaning if our community is ravished by COVID. So we need to take the time and get vaccinated. The president has put a number of things in place that will mandate vaccination in all the schools, in all government agencies, in all agencies that do business with the government. So it is real, and I just would hope those who are not vaccinated, especially those in neighborhoods of color, which have a very low vaccination rate, will take this opportunity to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say one thing. It's just my hope that next year at this time, we will have a co-op. If every community, there's so many other communities that are not as great as Greenberg, if they could have a co-op, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to figure out how to set it up. And, you know, we have a fantastic community center. You see Terrence Jackson's here. If we work with the community center, we work with the religious community, here. We work with all of you. We could make this a really fantastic, initiative that could hopefully be a model for other communities. So I really want to thank everybody for participating. And, I don't want you to walk out feeling that nothing's going to happen, because we're going to make sure something happens.
Don't forget the Civic Association.
And the Civic Association.
Thank you,
The
everyone, for
Juniper
your...
Hill Civic Association.
Thank you, everyone, for your condolences, and thank you for coming up. Over 50 residents participated tonight. You guys are superstars. Thank you, thank you, thank you.